Welcome to the Keeping IT Real podcast. This podcast features honest and transparent conversations about what it takes to manage corporate technology and expenses today. Each episode, listen to true and personal stories from IT professionals who are working hard to make sure their business stays connected and competitive. I'm your host, Jethro Castillo, and let's meet our next guest. Today, I am joined by Jon Santee, a VP of IT. Jon is an accomplished IT leader, successfully meeting business objectives through IT strategy. He has an innovative and people-first approach, always wanting to stay open-minded, embrace new technologies, and maximize the potential of his employees. Jon, thanks for being on the podcast.
Thank you for having me today.
Well, I obviously, to introduce you, I kind of had to stalk you a little bit, so I found you on LinkedIn, and it says VP of IT, but it also says Disney Dad and Retro Gamer. And I kind of want to jump into this before we talk all things IT and tech.
Absolutely.
Introduce yourself through those lens. Disney Dad and Retro Gamer. What does that mean?
Sure, absolutely. We all have our professional selves, especially if you're out there on LinkedIn. That's what everybody sees. But I also want to present that I'm a real human being. I'm a father of four. We are Disney fanatics. Part of why we moved to Florida was to be closer to Disney World. We're at that level of being fanatic. And then I grew up kind of not at the very beginning of the gamers. I'm a little younger than that, but a lot of the upright consoles and pinball machines and the original Nintendo. And I've really gotten into going back and playing those again. There's a simple type of fun in those that all of the immersive gaming that we have now, as amazing as it is, doesn't quite match that easy, just turn your mind off, relaxed gameplay that a lot of those older ones brought.
What games are you currently playing or have most recently played?
I've been super into pinball. That's actually where I've been putting a lot of my time. In terms of those older games, I've been really dialing it back. I've been doing like Centipede and Gallagher and some of those really true arcade classics.
Oh, that's awesome. Actually, one of my favorite memories of all time was going to a pinball machine when I was a kid, a pinball machine museum when I was a kid, and being able to go into this place and play pinball machines throughout the years. And it's actually on my bucket list to go back to one of those. And it's crazy that I haven't been, because it's just, I think it's that, and it's weird because I'm so young, so I don't get the nostalgia fully. It's not like I grew up in the era of that. But like you said, the technology nowadays, which we'll be talking about in detail, is crazy. And when you look at video games, it's extremely immersive. But there's something to be said about that retro, that throwback, the simplicity of it, but still also the ingenuity of it, of its time, right? And so I think that's really awesome. So I just have to ask, because I think that's so, you're right, it does make you more human, and also adds, especially for a podcast like this, an additional thing to talk about. Disney, how often do you guys go to Disney World?
So we are annual pass holders. We've been 4 times in the last couple of months.
Wow. No, that's cool.
Yeah, it's we're at that point where we'll go up there with a target to go and do. Okay, we're gonna do these 3 rides and get this to eat and go see this fireworks show. And that's the entire target of the trip for us, as opposed to being this massive blowout adventure where everybody's exhausted at the end of every day.
Yeah, which is typically how it is, right? When you don't live nearby. I was born and raised in San Francisco, and so obviously Disneyland is in the same state, but it's still 7 hours south.
Long run.
It's not really there. But we used to go every single year, and it was always like that. It was, we have to wake up at 6 a.m. We have to try to hit every single ride because we're only there for 3 days, and it ends up being more like a checklist rather than enjoying everything. And so just to hear that, it probably spins it on its head of how to enjoy that park much differently.
You can actually relax. Now, don't get me wrong. We have days where we'll start at the beginning, and then we'll go all the way through to a fireworks show at the end of the day, and then we'll get back to our hotel and be like, why did we do that? But no, it does give you that opportunity to kind of relax and do the things that you want to do and enjoy it a little bit more.
Oh, yeah. Well, thanks for that. I appreciate taking the first 5 minutes to kind of talk about something.
Sure.
I think that brings a little bit of humanity. Not that IT and tech isn't human. Well, we can talk about that. That gets a little interesting, especially with
how
AI.
far down the AI rabbit hole we're going to go here.
Yeah,
Wait a minute.
exactly. But let's start from the beginning. How exactly did you get started in the world of IT and tech?
I was a tinkerer growing up. Like I loved to take things apart, including any of the electronics that my parents bought. So I very quickly learned that if I didn't want to get in a lot of trouble, I had to be able to put it back together correctly. My parents then funneled that into getting me a computer whenever I was younger and letting me start to tinker with that. Really enjoyed kind of just messing around with them at the time. Got into college, started studying computer science, where I realized that I did not like programming and I was not good at it. But while I was in school, I started working for my university's help desk. And that was where I kind of discovered, as cliche and corny as it may sound, a passion for helping. But the fact that I was getting to do that while playing with technology became a bonus. From there, it just kind of blossomed. After I got out of school, I continued working through lots of various hands-on technology roles within support, infrastructure, and security before then moving over here to the other side of the desk and decided to take my shot at leading the teams.
And you kind of mentioned it, and I think this is a really cool way to bring it up. It's the helping part first, and then it was also the tinkering, but it was always the tinkering got to support the helping part.
It was. Those things got to fit together. So I was helping somebody by tinkering and fixing things while tinkering with computers and getting to stay kind of abreast of the technology and involved with the technologies as they were evolving.
Well, yeah, so I kind of have a curious question there because it's interesting because has always been cool, right? That's just always been it, especially now. That's what everything is: phones, laptops, computers,
Right.
self-driving cars, Teslas. But for some reason, IT never really got the same sort of the same sort of sexiness, if you will. I think that might be shifting. What are your thoughts on sort of that divide between IT and tech? There's sometimes people are like, I work for IT, but can you say tech because it sounds cooler? Where is
Well, we all got a little glimmer of hope with like Big Bang Theory. Like, oh, nerds going to be cool. But then, it's kind of subsided a little bit. Yeah, I think a big part of it is how quickly understanding how technology works gets complicated. And, we all have our silos where we understand our complicated, whatever our career path may be, whatever our profession may be. And whenever you start getting into all the layers of complicated that go into what make even by today's standards, simple technology work correctly, it's honestly can be a little bit dry and a little bit tough to go through. And, people are going to lose interest when you start, well, you've got this silicon, you have these conductors, you have these fabrication processes, you have these operating systems. And people are just like, huh? It's understandable. So it's tough to bridge that divide and make all of these gadgets and gizmos and tech that we all need and want and enjoy every day, or maybe try to escape, depending on where you are on the spectrum, but make it human and make it interesting. That's a challenge, and it's actually something that I enjoy speaking to.
And I think that's kind of the name of the game, especially for this podcast, but for IT, especially in today's day and age where bridging that gap is more important than ever. With so much being technologically driven, you need to be able to have the business understand the tech and the tech understand the business. How do you kind of navigate that as the person who is most critical for that, right? You are not just the person who needs to know tech, but you also need to know how to communicate it to the people who don't understand tech. So how do you kind of sort of advocate for the value of tech while not losing the people along the way?
So one of the things that I've been kind of speaking to a lot lately is we need to have a common language. We need to have a common business language where everybody in their different work areas is going to have their jargon and their acronyms and their lingo and their areas that they worry about. But at the end of the day, if we're all within an organization, we all have similar goals. We have similar objectives. And we need to start by speaking to those common goals, those common objectives, those common outcomes that we're looking for, and peel away our individual departments and our individual silos piece of it. Only then, once we all kind of understand that foundational piece, do we then start putting our individual bricks on top of it. And as we do that, we're able to build slowly into an understanding of this is why what accounting is doing is important. This is why what HR is doing, engineering, IT, each one of those, it becomes a simpler discussion because you've laid out that kind of common language. That's the key piece to it. If you miss that, then people aren't going to understand what they're talking about. Folks aren't going to understand the different challenges that they're facing and the different priorities that they're facing. And if you can't get that, then it's all lost. It's all going to fall apart from there.
And maybe you learn this from helping. I'm trying to figure out exactly where it comes from, but this is not a natural thing to understand, especially if you went to school for computer stuff. A lot of engineers you're not taught, actually unless you're in the world of business and marketing, most people are not taught how to communicate, if that makes sense. So where did you is that experience? Where did you kind of pick that up?
So it was sort of an interest. I found out, many, many years later that, the label that's been applied to me is I'm an extroverted introvert, meaning I really enjoy being around people, talking to people. I just have to recharge my batteries afterwards. But that led to me, especially early in my career, whenever I was in a support role and I would go and I was helping people across all of these different departments, I would have conversations and I would try to understand, okay, well, your report's not running. Let me see if I can fix that. Oh, well, what's this report do? And they would tell me about it. Or, oh, this isn't working for you. Well, what does this do for you? And they would tell me about it. So early on in my career, I kind of developed the curiosity around how all of the different areas work and what their language is and what their terminology is. And I figured out then as I moved a little bit more forward in my career, whenever I was sitting around with my technical teams, it would kind of be, well, John, you speak their language. Can you go talk to them and find out what they're doing? Or can you go be the person that goes and figures this out? Or you go give them the update because you speak business. You go do that. And that then led to a lot of opportunities for me as my career moved forward.
Oh yeah, that's really cool. But obviously to be able to speak, and we're going to go back to IT and tech here, to be able to speak their language, you have to know the language. And tech moves faster than anything. So what do you do to kind of make sure you are still on top of that language and keep up with the trends?
So I read every day. I've got different newsletters, different publications that are putting out digestible update because, if you tried to do a deep dive into all of it, you wouldn't have time to do anything else. So you need to be experts in your area and then kind of generalists everywhere else. And I try to spend a lot of time making sure that I'm keeping that generalist piece up to speed. The other piece of it is networking. I'm talking to peers in the industry all the time. I'm having conversations with people who are doing other areas of technology and doing it better than I ever could to understand, well, what are you doing? What are you working on? What's important for you? What are you worried about? What are the opportunities that you're going after? Between the constant reading and the keeping up with what's out there and talking to people who are doing the work day in and day out, it gives me a pretty solid foundation then to kind of understand where things are moving and how to apply where all of those things are moving to business needs.
And I think that's the really cool thing, at least especially in the tech world, is one, you have to be a constant learner more than almost any other department that I know of, a constant learner. But two, you have to do it. This sounds kind of cliche, but you have to do it together. There's too much information to silo learn. You kind of always have to team up and figure out what other people know that you don't. And then give what you know that they don't. And it's kind of this collective pool of knowledge. And I think that's a really cool thing about the world of IT is the best way to learn is with each other, for sure.
Yeah, you'll hear, and I'm sure it's something that you speak with a lot of your guests, everything around all of technology kind of ultimately boils down to change management.
Yeah.
And how do you handle change? How do you communicate change? How do you take people from horribly uncomfortable with change to embracing the change?
I think you definitely have. That has been, I didn't realize this when I started this podcast, but every single time I would talk, not almost every single time, the conversation would start to change towards change management. Every single time. That is the name of the game of your position specifically, is our department changes faster and it can solve a lot of problems. How do we introduce that to the rest of the team, the rest of the organization, so that they can receive that and adjust and move, because they don't have that same mindset necessarily. So,
and change fatigue is a real thing. Everybody wants to be able to do their job day to day, and they see oftentimes IT as these people coming in, well, they're just changing this to change it. They're just doing this to do it. And we've got to make sure that there's that controlled understanding around why we continue to move things forward.
On that note, though, IT has a difficult task with the pressure to move things forward, but also maintaining the stability and the security within the IT infrastructure. My question is, how do you kind of balance that need for innovation with cybersecurity, and how do you balance not being the always the changer or the always the, oh, we can't do anything because IT is just going to block it?
One of the ways I love to present this idea is I do kind of a triangle on a board, and I present that anything that my teams and I are going to be working on have to meet this idea of easier, faster, and more secure. Meaning we're going to look at anything that's brought to us, whether it's a new application, whether it's a new feature, whether it's new infrastructure or security measures, and we're going to ask ourselves, does this make things for our user base, for our client base, easier, faster, and more secure? If we can't answer yes to all three of those, doesn't necessarily mean that we're not going to do it, but it's going to make us take that step back and evaluate, well, why are we doing it? If it says yes to all three, that becomes easy. I mean, that's key. That's, you're going to be moving forward with that, assuming that there's resources available for it. But if you can't, then you're going to think about it. You're going to put a little bit more effort into it. You're going to put a little bit more understanding into, well, why are we going to move this forward? Keeping that in mind lays a really solid foundation for anything that you're trying to do, whether it's new system implementations, whether it's upgrades, whether it's, new hardware, whatever the case may be. It really gives a solid foundation that's then easily justifiable to the business.
I've talked to a lot of guests on this podcast, and sometimes I go, oh, maybe I've heard it all. I have never heard that approach before, and I think that's a really, really cool approach. Easier, faster, more secure. I think that's because I think one of the other things you guys have to do, not just change management, but project and priority management and triaging, and because resources are limited and you can't do everything. And so the question always becomes, well, then how do you know what to do and when to do it? And I think this is one of those ways, I think, to look at that triangle. So I think that's really cool. On that note, other than that, how do you prioritize IT initiatives within your organization, especially when resources are limited?
There's always going to be multiple pieces that come into play. There's going to be certain components of it that you just have to do, whether it's legal or regulatory compliance, whatever the case may be. There are certain things that move forward, and if you want to continue to be in business, you have to do it. Then there's also going to be market changes. You're going to see, well, our competitors are doing it, and we're going to be behind if we're not keeping up with them. So it's something that we need to take a look at. There's always going to be board and executive directives of, this is going to be how we're shifting or how we're moving the strategy of the organization. So you need to make sure that what you've got sitting out there in your project list is going to match with those priorities and those strategies. As you work through those things, it gets pretty clear pretty quickly where the time and effort needs to be in terms of both innovation and making sure that you're not accumulating, horrible amounts of technical debt.
Yeah. Taking a step back a little bit, because we kind of jumped and we dove into kind of the depths of sort of change management, project management, the assumptions of what your role does, but exactly what does your day-to-day kind of look like as a VP of IT?
So for me and my teams, I tend to be focused very heavily on the IT operations side of things. So I'm not leading a team of developers and engineers. I'm kind of on the infrastructure, support, security, basically anything that plugs in or has waves going through the air, or could be an attack vulnerability of any kind. Those are the things that my team and I are really focused on. So it's not necessarily the sexy side of IT, but it's, think of it like, your power and your water and your phone or internet. Those are things that just have to work. These are the things for an organization, all the shiny stuff, all the whiz bang stuff that they want to do. None of that is going to happen if all of those fundamental pieces of IT operations aren't there. And that's where I live, and that's where I really enjoy working.
And maybe, like you said, it's not the sexiest thing, but regardless, there are still things that you probably are excited about and things that you're kind of concerned about. What are those things moving forward in kind of your role in the world of IT?
So, yeah, that's the huge elephant in everybody's room right now. We're all talking about, what is AI going to do? I'm firmly on the side of, we're a long way from true AI, but what the models that we've got out there now, they're allowing us to both automate at a scale that we've never been able to before. We can have so many things happen so quickly without a lot of manual intervention, which is fantastic. You can think about self-healing networks. You can think about all the applications for end user support and end user care. The flip side of that means that all of the attackers and all of the vulnerabilities and all of the darker uses of it are also accelerating in how they can be used against you. So both sides of that same coin are the areas where I'm both really excited about what we're going to be able to do and also concerned that we're going to be able to do this correctly and securely and safely.
Yeah, especially because I don't know why, but bad guys seem to figure out how to work together much faster than the good guys sometimes.
It seems like they always have more budget than we do.
Yeah, that's a good way to say that. I'm curious, what's kind of the biggest challenge that you're facing in your role right now, and how are you looking to kind of tackle it?
Yeah, we've kind of spoken to it a little bit already. It really is the change management piece and the fact that all of this change, as I just alluded to with AI especially, it's always been faster and faster and faster, but now the curve has done the hockey stick moment. We're going to see where the pace at which everything that we're doing changes, it's going to astronomically increase. And being able to ensure that people stay comfortable with it, people stay aligned with it, people are able to take advantage of all of this change is going to be a struggle. It's going to cause a lot of worry. It's going to cause a lot of angst and confusion and frustration. And those of us here within the IT world are going to have to be there and be that bridge that helps everybody understand why we're doing it, what we're doing with it, and keep everybody kind of in that same looking forward, moving forward mindset.
Yeah, and so, I don't know how to say this. I don't know how to ask this any better, but how exactly are you doing that? Because it's it's one thing to say, oh yeah, we have to make sure that they're safe and feel okay with the changes, but the execution is another thing. On top of the fact that you have to still keep everything that's currently happening running and stable. So how do you kind of be that? Is that just planning of like script writing?
Here's the $1 million secret. And this is tough. It's really, really difficult. We have to talk to each other. And in our roles, especially, as leaders of IT and all of the different areas of business, we have to be talking to each other. We have to be open. We have to be communicating. There's no other shortcut. There's no other way to get there. There's no other way to do it. If we're not talking to each other and staying on the same page and staying aligned with each other, you can't do that on a text box screen. You can't do that via recorded memos. It's got to be interaction, whether it's over a video link or sitting across the table from somebody. We all have to be talking to each other. If we do that and we're open and honest and transparent with each other while we're doing it, we're going to be all right.
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess no matter how much planning and sort of knowledge that you have, at the end of the day, that conversation is between you and the other person, right? And so it's transparent, it's unscripted, it's just how it has to be, and hopefully you can meet each other where you guys are at and come to an understanding, right?
Well, here's what we're thinking about doing. Well, why are we going to do that? Well, here's what it can help. But have you thought about that? It's that back and forth in the exchange of ideas. It's how all innovation has happened. It's how all progress has happened. It's how everything has moved forward. And it hasn't changed. It's that having that conversation with somebody across the table from you about how to make something better.
Yeah. I am curious now, and this is kind of something that every guest kind of gets the chance to talk about. Can you talk about kind of a successful IT project that you've worked on in the past that you're kind of really proud of, and kind of how it's impacted the organization and contributed to success?
So I've been fortunate to go through a few kind of substantial technology transformations. I was part of several companies that went from stacks and stacks of virtualized hardware into virtualized environments, and then who've gone from on-premise environments to cloud environment. Those projects have been really rewarding because at each step, you've been able to provide value back to the company in the form of being able to work faster, to be able to innovate faster, to be able to provide value to customers and clients in a faster manner, all while generally being a lot more stable and a lot more secure while it's happening. And I've probably been through 6 or 7 transformations like that, that every time when we've come out the other side, you've been able to see a direct impact to the business, but more specifically to all the users in the business. They've been able to see aspects of their job get easier, which then ties back to like very early whenever I first started chatting here. It feeds back into that helper that I want to be and into the helping of others that I'm looking to try and achieve.
So kind of your mindset for a lot of the things that you do is kind of the person on the other side first. How can I make their life easier? And what are the steps I need to take to make sure I get there? Rather than, oh, here's something that I know will make it easier for everybody. Let's just implement it and hope it works. You really you do it in the reverse order so that you make sure everything is covered to ensure that the change that you will implement actually does impact their life in a better way.
That is the goal. That is where I get my, my big, endorphin rush is from seeing people say, oh, this is so much easier. Thank you. Like nothing gives me a better end to my day than hearing something like that.
That being said, though, in that, especially when you first started out in that helper role, that individual, it was that one-to-one, right? You were able to directly see the impact. Sometimes when you, not sometimes, but when you make big changes within your role now, you're impacting people that you might never actually directly talk to or see. How do you ensure then that it does reach the people that it needs to reach when you don't necessarily have that direct contact with them? Because you can agree with your business partners at your level of the organization and go, yeah, this will help. But then you still need to take it the next step further and make sure that when it gets to the end user, they have the knowledge they need to transition smoothly into that change. And so how do you ensure that happens? Because you can't just go to each individual person and go, okay, let's walk through this personally. So how do you ensure the change gets there?
So there's a couple of different ways. One, as cliche as it may be, is, doing very regular surveys. We're sending out and saying, hey, how are we doing? And letting people have an opportunity to give us the feedback. The other piece that I really like to do is, I stay in touch all the way up and down through all of my teams. At some point within my teams, there are people who still have those strong one-to-one connections with that end user population. I'm chatting with them and saying, what are you hearing? What are the feedback you're getting? What are the tickets that you're seeing? What are the requests that you're seeing? What are the complaints that you're hearing? And making sure that the people within my teams that are there on that front line talking to the general population throughout the organization, they had their opportunity to bring that back to us and say, hey, I know you might be hearing everything's great, but this is what we're seeing now across several of these departments, and they're all struggling with the same sort of a problem after this last whatever change that we made. That becomes just as critical as anything else that you can get, because you're getting that real-time feedback and gives you something then to action off of and try to make it better.
Something that I am worried about, though, is that requires honesty, right? Or their comfort to be able to share that vulnerably. How do you create that environment where people are, and maybe, you sometimes you don't know, right? Maybe people are, not everyone is giving the full feedback that you could want. But for the most part, how do you kind of generate that environment where people are comfortable to not just say, oh yeah, this is great, but to be like, hey, this is how I think it could be better as well?
It's all built on establishing trust, and that takes a while. Whenever you're in an organization, not everybody gets an opportunity to come into an organization that is very open and honest and already at that maturity level. Sometimes you'd have to take some time to build it up, and it becomes a lot of all the way up and down through all of the ranks of say what you'll do what you say, and then repeating that. And making sure that your actions are matching your words again and again and again until it becomes that established baseline of, okay, this person's being straight with us. His team is being straight with us. Her team is being straight with us. We can go to them and give them honest feedback because they're going to then try and help us.
And I guess the other thing too is if you ask for feedback and they give it and you don't do anything to act upon it, they might not feel incentivized to ever give feedback again. So it's also acknowledging their feedback and hearing it and making sure that they feel heard. For sure.
That's a fantastic call out. Once you get that feedback, you have to action on it, and you have to see what can you do to actually take it and fix what they're giving back to you.
Obviously, just by the way you talk, I can tell that you are good at your job. I don't think there's any doubt about that. But I think also I can only assume that that also means that there were times in your career where you've had learning experiences, right? That you weren't always as perfect or projects didn't go as planned. Is there anything? Is there anything that you could think of, projects or experiences where it didn't really go as planned, and what were the main lessons that you kind of took from those moving forward?
Well, I've had a few projects over my career that have been pretty rough to get through. The key for each of those, and the lesson that I took from all those, I'm going to kind of start at the end and work backward, is I never spoke up correctly. I did not feel that I was in a spot where I could give that open and honest feedback. I felt like I was given this directive and I had to go do it, as opposed to I was giving a directive. I had concerns. I would speak those concerns and then try to, work through and get a better solution established. And that each of the projects that I've had through my career where there's been a stumble, whether it's a CRM implementation or a new hardware rollout to multiple facilities, it has always come back to not giving good feedback about the system or the project or the vendor or the partner. And I learned from those that, again, the communication piece becomes the key. You've got to be out there. You've got to be in a spot where you know what you're trying to do and you're comfortable giving that feedback whenever you realize that something isn't right. And realizing that the business counts on, like us in IT, like other business leaders are counting on us to identify when something is technologically not a good fit or to be a problem. And they're counting on us to bring that back to them. And if we don't do that, then we're failing our piece of the overall project.
I'm curious because, you mentioned that you didn't feel comfortable speaking up and providing that feedback or speaking up. Yeah. One, I think I imagine that has helped you also realize and prioritize creating that environment of trust where people can feel comfortable giving feedback. So it's kind of that, it's kind of that thought process of, I don't want that to happen in my groups. But I'm curious, there's something to be said about sometimes it's not always about being comfortable. Maybe that environment wasn't set up for you, but it's about doing it anyways, right? And going, this is my role. This is my expertise. I'm going to stand up and talk about what I believe in, even though there's not that. You almost have to be a leader in that sense of like, okay, the environment wasn't given to me, but I'm going to create that anyways. Not really a question there, but I kind of wanted to hear if you had any thoughts on that.
It's a maturity aspect, whenever you first go, especially if you've been a high performing individual contributor and then you move over into a leadership role. And this gets into something that I've got a developing passion around is we have to teach people how to be leaders. We have to teach people how to express their concern, how to work with their team, how to work with a larger group of individuals beyond just whatever their little silo may have been. Those incidents for me in my career happened when I was definitely much less mature than I am now. Not that I'm super mature yet. Well, I was definitely less so. And, I didn't have that confidence. I didn't have the tools at the time to be able to properly bring concerns to the table or bring ideas and change to the table. And it's taken a lot of years of working with different types of leaders and different types of mentors for me to get to a point where I had that comfort level in myself to be able to do that. That's something now that I'm really trying to help out with younger leaders. I do a lot of conversations, a lot of one-on-one chats, and try to help them understand that, transitioning into a leadership role is hard. It takes time to develop the tools and to not be afraid to go out there and work on developing.
I guess you are a helper through and through. You're gonna be a great. You should just when you retire become a teacher in something. I feel like that would just almost fit so naturally into what you do.
That actually is the retirement plan. I grew up in an educator's household. My wife is a college professor. I've done teaching on the side as well. I actually really enjoy it. So long term, ultimately, whenever I get off of the corporate wheel, teaching is probably going to be where I land.
Well, I'm glad that I was able to read that in you, and it's a good thing for you too to kind of that's just kind of the energy you exude to really put other people first.
Good feedback lets me know that maybe I'm not too crazy.
Yeah, exactly. What was I gonna say to that though? That sort of I like this whole because I think something I've always noticed in life is we learn a lot of especially college was like 4 years ago for me, so that's aging me in the reverse direction. And we learn a lot about and I was actually pre-med in economics, and so I learned a lot about the study of those things. But something that we'd always run into is one of my professors was like, yeah, and it sucks because in med school you don't really talk about the compassionate care part of it, the communication part of it. And I always thought that was so frustrating in the sense that everything is about communication. It doesn't matter how much we know if we can't talk about it. And so just to hear you going, that is a huge priority is, yes, like I can be as IT savvy as I want to be. I can be as tinkery as I want to be. And I can be good at all those things. And the people underneath me can also be good at all those things. But I also want them to be good at being able to speak up and know what they want to share and the goals they want to accomplish. Because I think then you can actually maximize both things. You can maximize where the goals you want to accomplish, but you can maximize your passion, which is tinkering and being able to do stuff. And so I think that's a really, I wouldn't say that it's unique, but I think it's really important to kind of point out that IT requires now more than ever the ability to communicate and have the language necessary to talk about things, not just in the technical terms. And so I just kind of wanted to affirm you for kind of being a really good example of that, for sure.
Well, thank you. First off, I deeply appreciate that. That's very flattering. So thank you. One of the ways that I'm kind of phrasing it is, in a world where we are now seeing this idea of AI pushing forward and moving so quickly, I don't know that there's ever been a more important time for us to be human to each other.
Yeah. I won't say anything else in addition to that. I think that's just perfectly put. We're two kind of closing sort of questions for you. We kind of talked about your past and we've talked a lot about the present and a little bit about the future. But moving forward, what are some of your biggest priorities or challenges that you are looking to tackle? And how do you imagine that they'll support sort of the business moving forward? Generally, of course.
So of course, we've already touched on a little bit, what piece of it is going to be figuring out, what is AI really going to look like for us, not only in business, but as a society. That's something that we all need to be thinking about and really having a better understanding than I think most do at this point of what exactly it's going to mean in terms of how everything changes business and our day-to-day life. So being involved with conversations, getting involved with groups that are talking about it, people who are infinitely smarter than me are the ones who are developing this technology. But I want to be out there helping people understand how we use it and how we can safely incorporate it into what we're doing day in and day out. Another little piece of I've got going on, kind of a bit more practical and down to earth, is I'm starting to have a lot of conversations with like sales leaders and people in other functional areas around how they work with IT. How did they get into the door with us? How do they have conversations with us? How do we simplify the tens of thousands of new products and new vendors that are coming out every day? How do we simplify them getting in front of us so that we truly know what's out there and what's available and what can be helping us day to day? There's not a lot of people on both sides of that equation talking to each other. And I'm trying to help kind of open that door and be somebody on the buyer side of all of that, talking about what my experience looks like and what I'm looking for to be able to see the new tools and the new toys and all of the new technology.
Wait, yeah. I mean, okay, maybe I lied. Maybe I don't have two more questions because now I'm like, back in the day, I don't like saying that because I don't know what I'm talking about when I say back in the day. But back in the day, there were just a few products and services that you just needed to balance and weigh to understand what you needed for your company. And now that has increased by factors. There's no longer 10 or 15. There's like hundreds, thousands of different vendors trying to vie for your attention. How do you even know? One, you have to know what you need to buy, what problems you have to buy, and then two, you need to know who to buy it from. Where do you get the time and the information to really vet that?
That's really what I'm talking to people about is How do we help all of these new products and all of these new people out there get in front of me with what their product does and what the problem it solves may be, or what the opportunity it's going to allow me to go after really is, and do so in a manner that is quick, but also memorable. There's lots and lots of really bad techniques out there for trying to get in front of people. And I'm trying to give the feedback on, okay, out of the 500 people that tried to reach out to me in the last few days, here are what the 4 did that I responded to. Here's what they did right. Here's how they got that attention. Here's how they helped me understand what they're really bringing to the table, in an effort to then help all of them understand what's working to land. It's impossible to be able to see it all and to know it all. It doesn't matter what sort of agencies you're working with, brokerages you're working with. Ultimately, the pace of new product development is going to make it very difficult. It's something that the folks on my side of the equation, I'm trying to figure out, what does that look like as part of my day-to-day interaction? Because I could easily spend as part of my day-to-day examining new products, but then I wouldn't have a job. So what do both sides of this equation need to look like so that these great new products get the opportunities to come in and help me?
Wait, like I said, at the beginning, well, I guess like 15 minutes in the conversation, said, I think I've heard it all. And you've said 2 things now that I'm like, whoa, I have not heard of this, period.
Okay.
One is that triangle thing, but 2 is this, you're like helping other people, because I think it benefits you, right? You're like, I want to make sure that the right vendors and the right products are coming to me. Here's what's worked for me to approach me, so that you can help these people alter the way that they approach people. I just think that's so, I don't know. I think that's so different. That's so unique. I think a lot of times it's like, you have it in you to kind of help in all aspects, not just to just help the IT or help the business. It's like, no, wait, I want to help people sell better, but I guess it also helps you because then it helps you buy better. So
while it sounds wonderfully altruistic, at the end of the day, it helps me as well. If I've got people coming to me in a more efficient manner, showing me what they've got that can help me, it only makes sense that I figure out ways to speed that process up and make it less painful for everybody.
And I guess that is the answer, right? Instead of going, we have thousands of vendors to vet, instead of going, okay, yeah, increase the time you need so you can vet all of them, which is impossible, figure out a way to make it work on, like you said, on both sides, so that the right people reach you at the right time, which I think
that's the idea.
So
I don't know that I'm there yet. I don't think I have a magic solution, but I'm at least starting the conversation. And so far, I like the results that I'm seeing as I'm talking to more and more people.
No, I think that's really cool. That's something that's going to stick with me for a while. Just like, whoa, that just works all the way around. Okay, so the final sort of closing sort of thought is kind of I would say your soapbox moment, but the last 45 minutes has kind of been a cool soapbox moment. But that final, the soapbox on top of the soapbox, what are some of the most important lessons, closing thoughts, ideas that you've learned over your career that you'd like to impart on the audience at the end of this all?
At the end of the day, we have to realize that we're all humans and we're all kind of pointed in the same direction. We might have different priorities, different opinions, different thoughts, but we're all stuck with each other, whether, it's my neighbor next door to me or somebody across the street. Ultimately, we're all kind of stuck on this planet. We all have to work together, and trying to figure out just how can we embrace that? How can I be a part of making all of that better has been an undercurrent for the last 15 or 20 years for me of just, where does my little piece of this puzzle come in? And how can I help move it forward? And that's every time I have conversations like this, I'm trying to embody, how do we do that? And how do we grow together? How do we work together? And how do we move things forward together? That is kind of the central takeaway that I have from all of these different conversations that I have. And we hear this all the time, be better humans. That's kind of the ultimate pinnacle of my soapbox, is just, what do we each have to do to be better humans to each other?
Well, John, I don't want this to sound like more flattery, because I promise I mean this, but I think in the 45 minutes, 50 minutes that we've talked, I think you succeeded with me. I think this became a very, you said you kind of have to bring comfort and establish that trust. And throughout the course of this conversation, I felt it just almost immediately really easy to talk to you and feel that humanness. I think it's also, I want to bring this up, but your eye contact virtually is crazy good. Like, usually people are like looking slightly down, and I think I might be doing that to you, but like to me, you're looking at me straight in the eyes, which means you're probably looking directly at your camera, which requires like great balance. So that too, I think, adds to the humanness. And so I think you do try to embody that, and I think you did embody that on this episode. So I just want to say thank you so much for a really human conversation, a really smart conversation too. And I can only imagine that you and the people that you're mentoring and the people that you're leading can only succeed. And I think that's just in a large part to you, but I think you would also say no, but it's also a large part because of all of us being human and working together. And so I just want
it absolutely, one person can't do it. So thank you for all of those kind words, though. I definitely appreciate them. And I'm working on my looking away and my looking down.
I'm not
in progress.
I'm not good at it. So just you doing that, I was almost like, whoa, he is staring into my soul today, and I am not used to that over the screen. So that I just wanted to acknowledge you for that. But again, as much as you've thanked me, I just want to say again, thank you for taking this time to share all I feel 45, 50 minutes better of a human. And I think that says something about you, and that says something about our conversation. So I hope anyone listening kind of takes something from that as well. So again, just thank you, and I wish you all the best, and I hope that we can keep in touch. I want you to teach me more.
Well, I certainly can make myself available. So great. Thank you for the time. Thank you for the really good conversation. I know we've meandered around several topics, but I really like what we've touched on and just kind of the ideas that we've shared today. So I really appreciate that.
Well, I wish you all the best, and take care.
Thank you.
VCOM Solutions is here to help make your IT projects and day-to-day operations as easy and efficient as possible. If you'd like to see how VCOM can help your organization save time and money, request a demo at vcomsolutions.com/demo. Do you work in IT? Be a guest on our podcast. Go to vcomsolutions.com/keepingitrealguest to sign up. Thanks again for dropping in. Don't forget to subscribe, and you can find us on social media at VCOM Solutions. Until next time.